Today is March 3rd. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It's a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today, we're going to be reading out of the Big Book, Gratitude in Action, pages 193 through 195. And out of the 12 and 12, we're going to be continuing our journey through Step 8. We'll be reading the first half of page 78 today. So with all that, my friends, I hope you're doing well today, and let's get right to the good stuff. All right, so if you'll recall from yesterday, we finished up in the Pioneers of AA, Bill Dotson's story. And man, it was a beautiful, beautiful ending to that story, his testimony. And I love how he finishes up with, I came into AA solely for the purpose of sobriety, but it has been through AA that I have found God. I feel that is about the most wonderful thing that a person can do. So I absolutely love that ending, and now we're going to get a new testimony. This next story is called Gratitude in Action. It's the story of Dave B., one of the founders of AA in Canada in 1944. This is on page 193. I believe it would be good to tell the story of my life. Doing so will give me the opportunity to remember that I must be grateful to God and to those members of Alcoholics Anonymous who knew AA before me. Telling my story reminds me that I could go back to where I was if I forget the wonderful things that have been given to me, or forget that God is the guide who keeps me on this path. In June 1924, I was 16 years old and just graduated from high school in Sherbrooke, Quebec. Some of my friends suggested that we go for a beer. I had never had beer or any other form of alcohol. I don't know why, since we always had alcohol at home. I should add that no one in my family was ever considered an alcoholic. Well, I was afraid my friends wouldn't like me if I didn't do as they did. I knew firsthand that mysterious state of people who appear to be sure of themselves but are actually eaten alive with fear inside. I had a rather strong inferiority complex. I believe I lacked what my father used to call character. So on that nice summer day in an old inn in Sherbrooke, I didn't find the courage to say no. I became an active alcoholic from that first day, when alcohol produced a very special effect in me. I was transformed. Alcohol suddenly made me into what I always wanted to be. Alcohol became my everyday companion. At first, I considered it a friend. Later, it became a heavy load that I couldn't get rid of. It turned out to be much more powerful than I was, even if, for many years, I could stay sober for short periods. I kept telling myself one way or another that I'd get rid of alcohol. I was convinced that I'd find a way to stop drinking. I didn't want to acknowledge that alcohol had become so important in my life. Indeed, alcohol was giving me something that I didn't want to lose. In 1934, a series of mishaps occurred because of my drinking. I had to come back from Western Canada because the bank I worked for lost confidence in me. An elevator accident cost me all of the toes of one foot and a skull fracture. I was in the hospital for months. My excessive drinking also caused a brain hemorrhage, which completely paralyzed one side of my body. I probably did my first step the day that I came by the ambulance to Western Hospital. A night shift nurse asked me, Mr. B, why do you drink so much? You have a wonderful wife, a bright little boy. You have no reason to drink like that. Why do you? Being honest for the first time, I said, I don't know, nurse. I really don't know. That was many years before I learned about the fellowship. You might think I'd tell myself if alcohol causes so much harm, I'll stop drinking. But I found countless reasons to prove to myself that alcohol had nothing to do with my misfortunes. I told myself it was because of fate, because everyone was against me, because things weren't going well. I sometimes thought that God did not exist. I thought, if this loving God exists, as they say, He would not treat me this way. God would not act like this. I felt sorry for myself in a lot of ways. My family and employers were concerned about my drinking, but I had become rather arrogant. I bought a 1931 Ford with an inheritance from my grandmother, and my wife and I made a trip to Cape Cod. On the way back, we stopped at my uncle's place in New Hampshire. This uncle had taken me under his wing at the time of my mother's death, and he worried about me. Now he said to me, "Dave, if you stop drinking for a full year, I will give you that Ford Roadster that I just bought." I love that car. So I immediately promised that I wouldn't drink for a whole year. And I meant it. Yet, I was drinking again before we reached the Canadian border. I was powerless over alcohol. I was learning that I could do nothing to fight it off, even while I was denying the fact. Oh man, I can relate to a lot that's been mentioned there. We'll return to that in just a minute. Alright, so out of the 12 and 12, we're on step 8, which is made a list of all persons we'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So yesterday we talked briefly about how if a willing start is made, then the greatest advantages of doing this will quickly reveal themselves, that the pain will be lessened as one obstacle after another melts away. How willingness really plays a part in step 8. Are we willing to make these amends? Whether they're direct or indirect. And if we're not, as I said, our friend told me one time, pray to be willing to be willing. And you'd be amazed what God can do. So we're on 78. We're going to read the first 2 paragraphs of the page. These obstacles, however, are very real. The first, and one of the most difficult, has to do with forgiveness. The moment we ponder a twisted or broken relationship with another person, our emotions go on the defensive. To escape looking at the wrongs that we've done one another, we resentfully focus on the wrong he has done to us. This is especially true if he has, in fact, behaved badly at all. Triumphantly, we seize upon his misbehavior as the perfect excuse for minimizing or forgetting our own. Right here, we need to fetch ourselves up sharply. It doesn't make much sense when a real tosspot calls a kettle black. Let's remember that alcoholics are not the only ones bedeviled by sick emotions. Moreover, it is usually a fact that our behavior when drinking has aggravated the defects of others. We've repeatedly strained the patience of our best friends to a snapping point and brought out the very worst in those who didn't think much of us to begin with. In many instances, we are really dealing with fellow sufferers, people whose woes we have increased. If we are now about to ask forgiveness for ourselves, why shouldn't we start out by forgiving them, one and all? Alright guys, we'll stop there on today's reading. I really like the line in the 12 and 12. In many instances, we are really dealing with fellow sufferers, people whose woes we've increased. And then just before that, let's remember that alcoholics are not the only ones bedeviled by sick emotions. So we're not the only ones sick out there. In my experience, everybody's got problems. Nobody's perfect. When I have expectations of others sometimes, I will be disappointed. My expectations are inversely proportional to my serenity. If I have low expectations, I seem to be a whole lot happier. If I have really high expectations of other people and myself, well, because I'm human, I'm going to let myself down. And don't get me wrong, I don't use that as an excuse not to work hard. I do everything in my power, but I'm still going to mess up. And I'm still going to do some selfish things every now and then. And the biggest thing is I just realize, well, I'm human. God, please forgive me. What can I do next time to learn from this experience? I don't have to personalize my failures. And I don't have to take personal what other people do. I like what a friend said one time. They said to me, Rob, sometimes they're not doing it directly to you. They're just doing it because they're people too. And the 4th step prayer really helps with this, that praying for other people. God, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? I love that part. Nobody's perfect. I can relate to Dave so much in his story, when he's talking about his inferiority complex, and he says, I believe I lacked what my father used to call character. Oh man, I can relate to that. I don't know where my inferiority complex came from, but that lack of character, whatever you want to call that, I didn't really have a whole lot of that before, while I was drinking. And buddy, when I would drink, that gave me this transformation. All of a sudden I'm confident. I'm feeling good about things. Things are funnier. And then drinking turned on me. That became the one thing I wanted to do rather than spend time with my family or anything else. It gave me that peace for a while until it absolutely destroyed my life. So I can certainly relate to why he drank in the first place. And I can relate to the struggles he's going through now. And it obviously must be pretty bad where everybody around him is saying, why do you do this? And I love what Dave says. It's a very honest answer. He goes, I don't know. And for me, I didn't really know. It wasn't really until I worked the steps that I realized why I was resorting to the drink in the first place. On the other side of drinking, now in my sobriety, the very thing that I lacked before, when I had that inferiority complex, I'm working on building character now. And for me, this is just Robology right here. Character is growing more into the person that God intended me to be in the first place. It'll be a lifetime process, but it's one step at a time, trudging through that road of happy destiny. It's just one step at a time. So with all that, my friends, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me in this lifeboat of recovery. It truly is an honor to be here. As I try to say, I don't speak on behalf of AA or any sect, denomination, anything like that. I am just a recovering alcoholic, a grateful recovering alcoholic, and just a dude. Happy to be here, and I'm so happy you're with me. I hope you all have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow.